Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We are in the throes of our membership drive, and I'm just so excited that that you've decided to join us and be with us as we engage in this process of talking about issues that are important to you as members of the of conflict resolution Minnesota. And there certainly are lots of things to talk about, to engage in, to think about. And so we're going to spend some time doing that today as we get into this conversation about how we mediate those conflicts, right? And so from my experience, it is more important to recognize why we do things oftentimes than some of the things that we do, right? So if we don't know the reason why, then a lot of the things that we're doing may seem or feel in vain, right? So I think it's important to understand the reason why. And so all too often, what folks don't recognize is that we're after very similar things, right? So as human beings, we are after very, very similar things. We're after you know what, I'm just going to put some of those things up here on the board. We are after the sense of safety, right? So we want to be safe in our relationships. We want to be safe in our workplaces. We want to be safe in our communities. We want to be safe in our homes, right? And that safety comes in a number of forms. In some cases, it comes in the form of physical safety, right? So both my person being safe, as well as being able to have the food, water, and clean air I need to be safe, right? So those are some motivators that drive people's behavior. We also recognize that we are looking for the sense of belonging, right? And belonging is very simply put, is the recognition that I have a place in this world, right? Both a metaphorical place or a existential place, right? But I can connect with people who want to share in this sense of safety. I can connect with people who understand how to be safe with me, right? So we start with this idea of safety, and then we move on to the sense of belonging. And then lastly, we have significant, let me make sure, put that space in there, significance, right? Significance. Yeah. So we're all looking for significance. And so when we think about this significance, what is the root word of that? Is we want a sign. We want a sign that people are recognizing our purpose, our power. And so when it comes down to it, that significance manifests itself in the sense of power and purpose, right? So when we're thinking about even talking about conflict, when we're talking about navigating the space, we recognize that all human beings are looking for safety, they're looking for belonging, and they're looking for significance, or this access or manifestation of their purpose and their power, right? So that's what we recognize. And those are some of the commonalities that actually drive our work as mediators, or should drive our work as mediators, right? So if you're really engaging in this process of mediation. This is something that you oftentimes know. And so, should become second nature as you're helping people navigate through conflict. And so as a navigator, you don't solve their problems, right? As a matter of fact, you can't solve their problems, because I don't know that you can give them, you can create an atmosphere of safety, but you can't give them safety, right? You can create a space where folks can feel belonging, but you can't give them that feeling of belonging. You can set up a space where their significance, their purpose, and their power can be manifested, can be used to shape their destinies, right, as opposed to ours. And it's so funny. Oftentimes, I have found when I'm helping people navigate through conflict that they want me to come up with a plan, right? Or they ask me what they should do. And I really, really resist that. And I think most great mediators do that as well, resist that, because unfortunately, the failure of that plan will be attributed to me, right? And what's even scarier about that is that they may actually attribute the success of that to me. Right. And when we think about this nature of kind of these intrinsic, getting people to think intrinsically as opposed to reacting from external stimuli, we recognize that the strongest of us are those individuals who recognize that they can generate that power as opposed to importing that power. Because when you are a person who operates from this kind of internal center, particularly when solving problems, what we recognize is that is where your strength lies. Your strength lies from that internal work that you're able to do, as opposed to importing it from other places. And when we import those things from other places, what we also know is that source could dry up. I could actually be detrimental to myself by not having access to those resources, right? And so when we think about that, that becomes very important as mediators to recognize that people are looking for safety, they're looking for belonging, they're looking for significance through the manifestation of their power and their purpose, right? And so I want to be connected with folks because of those three things. And so when we talk about this, these conversations in the Mediator Cafe, I want to say thank you for all of those who are listening live, those who are listening to the recording, those who are on the call with us today, because we're hoping that you get something that helps you become better at your skill, right? So before we go too much further into this, I want to pay some bills, right? I want to pay some bills. And so what I'd like for us to kind of remember is that this is part of our membership drive, and there are some benefits to membership. Membership has its privileges. And so what are some of the benefits of being a part of Conflict Resolution Minnesota? Well, first, you get discounts on trainings and conferences. Those CLEs or those things that you those continuing education credits, you can get those here as a member at a discount. Right? You get live webinars like this one that you're listening to, that you're participating in right now. You get that live engagement with our with other members, as well as the board, as we really try to direct these wonderful programs in ways that benefit you as members. And then there's the mentoring and coaching that we do together, right? So we don't all know everything. And I'm so glad that I have members that I can draw upon, because when I have a challenge, when I have a problem, when I'm trying to think through something, I have other mediators, other neutrals, other restorative justice coaches that can pull my coattail, or they can say, Andre, if you may want to consider this as you're trying to be more effective in that. And so I'd like to share with you again, membership has its privileges, and the membership right now is only $60. Right. That I mean, if we were on TV, we would suggest that is just pennies a day, right? Less than pennies a day. So that $60 goes a long way in our membership. And so for our students, for our AmeriCorps members, for some of our volunteers, there may be some opportunities for scholarships. So please take that opportunity to consider joining this great organization, and so yeah, we look forward to your participation. So let's get into the ground rules for these conversations. And people ask me, they say, Andre, like, why do you go over the ground rules for each of the cafes? Well, one is I'm trying to model the behavior, right? And so when we go into a mediation space, if we don't set the table properly, folks won't know how to interact, right? And so we want to set the tone for interaction. And so I'm going to share some of these ground rules and agreements. And the interesting thing is I only have one ground rule, but I have lots of agreements, but we'll talk about the difference between those, or why we use that methodology when we're in this space. So first and foremost, what we recognize oftentimes is that conflict in itself is an illusion. Conflict oftentimes is an illusion. What do you think I mean by that? What do you think I mean by the fact that that conflict is oftentimes an illusion? And I see Dr. Jacqueline is on the line. Would you mind kind of unmuting and helping me explore that? So what do I mean by oftentimes conflict is an illusion? If you're able to, I'm not sure if you're able to or not. You can type it in the chat room too, because I read. I'm a reader. Okay, so it looks like you're not able to come on, but so I'll just spill the beans myself. I'll just tell you myself. So when we think about this notion of conflict, let's look at this diagram. Of these individuals, which one is right? Which one is wrong? I would suggest to you that in this particular case, it's not about right or wrong. It's about their approach to trying to solve the problem, right? And so oftentimes when we come into conflict, it is because we have differing methods, we come from different approaches, we have different backgrounds, and when those two come together, there's not the clarity of purpose. There's not the clarity of communication, right? So, and I oftentimes use this example because this is the kind of stuff that I mediated, where, you know, a neighbor's tree leaves are reaching over the fence and falling into the other neighbor's yard. Typically, the conflict that ensues is really not about the tree leaves. It's really not about the number of leaves that fall on that property. At some point in that conflict, someone did not feel like they were getting safety. They didn't feel like they were being seen as significant, and they also didn't feel like that person was honoring their belonging. Right. So one of those three things was missing in that conflict, and truth be told, if you as a mediator can help them get to that, then you're being effective. but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to these ground rules and agreements, right? So the first is focus your attention on the goals. So one of the first agreements that we want to do is have people focus on the goals of why we're gathering, why we're getting together. And the funny thing is, you can apply this even to your own life as an individual, right? So what is my purpose for telling that joke? What is my purpose for making this statement? What do I hope to gain from this interaction? And so when we're focused on our goals, we don't have those aberrant behaviors that sometimes things pop up and people will say, well, I didn't mean to say that. So the question is, what did you mean to say? Right. Those are important things to recognize, that even in our personal interaction, what is the goal of my behavior, right? The next is recognizing, how do I align my thoughts, my behaviors to my values? And so when I'm acting as a person of value, based on my values, then I'm more than likely going to treat the other person in a respectful manner, in a way that recognizes what their needs are, because at our core, we have very similar values, but our approaches and our methods to how we actualize those values may in fact be very different, right? And so we have lots of things that are very similar, but we also engage very differently. And then engage in curiosity, not judgment. If you come into a situation already knowing the outcome, why are we even talking? Why are we engaging? If you already know the outcome, just either tell me the outcome or operate as if you know the outcome, and then we won't have a conflict, right? Right. So this notion of conflict becomes important to, engage in this curiosity, so that we can discover things together. We know that this curiosity engenders the creation of energy, of drive, of excitement, right? Judgment does nothing but condemn and shut people down. It kills or stifles energy and enthusiasm, right? And so the next thing that I offer you is this notion of offering what you need. I will give the world what I am in need of, because that's how I get it, right? So embody what it is that you need, and give that, because the universe, human beings, will respond to that and give that back to you. It's so funny. I had a neighbor across the street in my old house, and this guy was a cursor. He cursed like air, right? Everything he said was blankety blank and bloom, 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 and all sorts of stuff. And I happen not to be a cursor. Like I don't judge people who curse or whatever. You do you, let me do me. And it's so funny, because every time we interacted at the mailbox, he would start apologizing for cursing. I didn't tell him not to curse. I didn't shame him for cursing. And then as our relationship grew at the mailbox, he found himself not using curse words hardly at all, so he didn't have to apologize. But I never told him. I gave him respect. I gave him dignity. But there was something about me modeling the kind of behavior that I wanted to receive that he picked up, right? And so, no, I'm not a prude. I'm not, and I just think that there are other ways for me more effective ways for me to communicate my thoughts than using that kind of language. And for some people, that's what they choose to do. Go for it, right? But that is not in line with my values. Right. So I think being a person of purpose and values is important. The last thing I'd like for you to offer, last two things, is give the grace that you have been given. We've all been given lots of grace. There are times that we've made mistakes, times that we've, not done the right thing at the right time, and we have been given grace. So give other people grace just as you've been given. And here is my last ground rule. Here's my one and only ground rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Treat others the way you want to be treated. So there's a lot packed in that one ground rule. And some of the stuff that's packed in that ground rule is this recognition that you have to know what other people, how they want to be treated. So here comes the question. How do you know how other people want to be treated? You have to have a relationship with them, right? Because they'll tell you how I want to be treated. All right. If you ask, they will tell you. And so that recognition is important for mediators to take into account as we're developing these skills, right? So let's talk a little bit. So we in the past couple of weeks, we've talked about different aspects of mediation, and a lot of this conversation has been centered around or built on our ability to be effective as leaders, right? So how do I become more effective as a mediator in these spaces, particularly when it comes to recognizing my own hot buttons, recognizing my own blind spots? And I heard something the other day about blind spots, and in some ways that, well, I won't say that. We'll talk about that at another time. But there are oftentimes areas of my life, of my behavior, that are not in my conscious purview, right? There are things that may be temporarily hidden from me. And so how do I start to get at those things? How do I learn how to be more effective, particularly in a way that allows me to grow and develop my skills? And so one of the things that I like to use is, as I seek to be more effective, is this schema, if you will, this way of looking at the world that is oftentimes referred to as Johari's window, right? And so the great thing about Johari's window is that this gives us some real pragmatic, practical tools for being effective, right? So there's some pragmatic, practical tools that we can use to become more effective. And so there are 4 quadrants to this window, right? So Johari's window. Now, the interesting thing about a window is that oftentimes a window serves 2 purposes, right? It keeps stuff out and it keeps stuff in. However, it is also transparent, so you can see through it, right? So it is a barrier by which you can be observed and you can be the observer, right? So when I think about this Johari's window, this is one of the pieces that I particularly use when I'm thinking about how can I be most effective. And so in Quadrant One, there is this open area, this free area. In Quadrant Two, there's this there's a large piece of this that they use the term blind area, and I would just say is out of awareness, right? And then in Quadrant Three, there is the hidden area, and what they mean by that is that these are things that I am hiding from the world. These are things that I know about me that I don't want anybody else to know. Right? This blind area is things that other people know about me that I might not know. And then this open free area is the things that you see or you know about me because it's out there, right? So I'm African American. I'm cis. Well, you may not know that, but I'm African American. I'm a cisgendered male, which I think comes across that is something that's known by me and known by others, right? So those are important things. When we get into, and we'll talk more about those in just a second. And then quadrant 4 is this kind of blind spot, right, where these things are out of our awareness. So we'll spend a little time kind of going through each of these, and I'll give some examples, and then towards the end, I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about how you might use Johari's window. You can either type that in the chat room, you can send it in the email. If you're watching this as a rebroadcast, you'll type that into the tool so that we can engage in conversation. So that's important. So let's get into quadrant 1. So quadrant one is very interesting because these are all the things that we think we know about other people. And the shadow side of this open and free area is that oftentimes people will see things, or they think they see things, and they derive meaning from those things, right? And so although it may be something that I see and something that you see, what those things mean to each of us may be very different than what is appearing. Right. And so that's important to recognize that in this open and free area, we want to talk about our observations, but we're not in a position to apply meaning to those observations as of yet. Right. And so there are things that are known by me and known by others. So what does it mean to be a cisgendered male? May mean something different for me than it does for someone else, right? What it means to be African American or Black, as I prefer, may mean something different to me than it does from the observer, right? So there's this recognition of that, and so those are some of the things that you'll find in this primary space. And so when we get to 2, there are these things that are known, unknown to me, but known by others, right? So there are these things that are unknown to me, but are known by others. And so examples of that might be I'll use this one. I won't be crass. It would be if we went out to dinner or to lunch, and you saw that I had spinach in my teeth. Right. And so that would be something that you see about me that I may not recognize until I go to the mirror. Right. And then I'd be able to see that, or until I engage in some kind of reflective process or practice, I may not be able to see that about my personality, or may not be able to recognize that about my preferences. Right. So that becomes important, and we'll come back to like how this plays out in a pragmatic way in just a second. So we have that, and now when we come to quadrant 3 is very interesting because this is things that are known by me but are not known to others, right? And so this is a lot of the space where in Johari's window, this is the place where sometimes our effectiveness can be hidden, or we're shy about those things, or there are this is where the show person, right, the actor kind of comes out, because sometimes in that hidden area we are we're not excited about sharing those things that are that might not be our best, right? And this is, interestingly enough, a place where humility becomes our greatest asset to be able to share what it is that is in our hidden areas, because that's how we learn. So my grandmother used to say, it's a poor dog that, no, not that one. She would say, a closed mouth never gets fed. right? And what she meant by that was, if you don't speak up about needing assistance, if you don't speak up about needing help, we can't help you. We can't sharpen that skill. And too often in Johari's window, folks find themselves in quadrant 3. And now we're going to move on to quadrant 4, which is, pretty prima facie when we think about this notion of what it means to be in a blind spot, right? In an unknown area, in a unconscious bias, or not in our primary awareness bias, right? However you want to phrase that. And that's where, there are things that you don't know about yourself and other people don't know about yourself. And this is where, in our ground rules, we talked about being curious and not judging. This is where that curiosity pays its biggest dividends, right? In this area that we don't know, because we can actually be surprised at how effective we can be, even though we don't know that lies dormant in us, right? So we'll come back to this in just a second as we kind of talk about how we use the tool of humility to kind of become more effective using Johari's window. And so I want to come back to the large window and talk about how can we use this to be a more effective? How do we use Johari's window so that as a mediator, I'm operating at my optimal, right? I have moved, and I don't know if it's age or what it is, or the readings that I've done, the times that we're in, or whatever. But I've really moved away from talking about things in kind of polarized. Well, maybe that's not quite it either, but maybe moralized positions, right? So whether something is good or bad, I'm less interested in talking about that as I am talking about, are things effective or are they ineffective, right? Is this working or is it not working, right? Is this accomplishing our goals or is it not accomplishing our goals? And I guess, I'm less interested in the moralizing of good or bad, or things will be better, or, I'm less interested in that. And I'm more interested in really thinking about the pragmatism of becoming more effective, right? And so when I think about this notion of being effective, and there are things in my quadrant 2, there are things that are unknown to me but are known to others. I need this tool of humility to ask questions about my own behavior. Now, what is the and anybody can unmute on this question, but what is the danger, or maybe it's not even danger, but what is the challenge oftentimes to asking for feedback about one's behavior or even my mindset? What's the risk associated with that? Anybody have an idea of what the risk might be in asking?
Well, this is Francis Lee. I'm exposing myself to others, and it is that's definitely a risk.
Yeah. So exposing myself to others is a risk, but is the risk in the exposure? Or is there something deeper than just the exposure?
I think in the exposure, and also in perhaps having our selves being maybe undermined ourselves a little bit, or lacking self-confidence in self.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not even so much the exposure, It's the feeling of lack or the inferior feeling, right? Yeah. So, Dr. Jacqueline, what would you say? What's the risk in asking people about, give me some feedback about my mindset, or give me some feedback about my behavior? What's the risk?
I think one of the greatest risks that most of us may have is that the vulnerability. We put ourselves in a position where we are vulnerable. The other thing is, sometimes when you ask someone to give you feedback about yourself, you have to be ready to receive what the individual is saying, because it puts you in a place where, since you ask, you have to be open to receive what they're saying. It may not be your truth, however, it may be their truth. Can I elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, please, come on.
I'm taking a women's leadership class right now, and one of the things that one of the challenges was I had to send a questionnaire out to 5 women who had to give me feedback about myself. Well, in that, a lot of times it's like when you do a referral for a position, you don't always get a chance to see or hear what other people have said. In this, I had the opportunity to hear what other people said about me. It did a couple things for me. One, it surprised me. 2, I didn't necessarily see myself as they saw me. And the other thing was, sometimes you're not aware how much value you add to other people's lives, just like what you're doing right now today. So the community is enhanced. And I feel like this, one of the, a disease that's curable is ignorance. So you're making it where maybe we know this information, but it's been reiterated. So it's like, this is on time, something that we need to hear now. So the biggest thing I would say is we make ourselves also vulnerable to hearing what other people may believe or think about us.
And it may be in conflict with what we think about ourselves, right? Yeah. So it takes a tool of humility. And this is the funny thing. And I've taken this position in my personal life, in my professional life, that the truth lies between my perception and their perception, right? So somewhere in the middle is what the truth. And people say, well, the truth is relative. I don't believe that. Look, I have not seen any. There are some things that are absolute truths. You cannot bring somebody back that passes. I've not seen that, right? So there are certain things that there are these universal truths, and that's a whole nother conversation. However, when we think about our relationships with other people, and I'm asking for feedback, the scariest thing is being open to what they say, right? The most yeah. So when I think about my psychology, like the dissonance, that's the word I was looking for, comes when you actually have to listen to what people say. And I am of the mind that it is not really about the asking, but it's really about the listening, where that growth happens, right? Where that growth happens. So let's go over to Quadrant 3, because Quadrant 3 it has some unique attributes as well, right? So these are things that I know, but I don't want anybody else to know. I'm not gonna look. I have a little bit of a stutter. I know that, but I don't want anybody else to know. Guess what? Guess what the funny thing is about the thing I'm trying to cover up? Somebody knows. So the thing I'm trying to cover up, somebody recognizes, and it's probably somebody who's trying to cover it up too, right? And so we spend a lot of time, and this is where I was talking earlier about this notion of the actor, right? This is where the actor comes out. This is where inauthenticity lives, is in this space where I don't want people to know that I'm not good in this area, or I don't want people to know that I have this flaw, or that I have a challenge with this thing. And when I'm operating in this kind of fictitious reality where I'm trying to overcompensate, what does that become for someone?
It becomes their norm sometimes.
Sometimes it becomes their norm, right? And it can also become a prison, right? So I have to be, I have to be, right? So I can't just drive any car. I've got to have the top of the line car, because, you know, if I don't, people won't think I'm ... right? Or I have to have the latest thing, because if I don't, people will see me as less than, which goes back to what Francis was talking about, some of these those fears of inadequacy, right? You know what's liberating, particularly in this particular quadrant? When you don't have to act, right? That's why people love, you know, they like having spouses. They like having partners. They like having people they can build a life with, because at some point they realize this is not a person I have to act with, right? You know, I'm the same person, but my girlfriends and my wife are different. My relationships are different, right? So, I mean, when I had a girlfriend, I don't have girlfriends now. That's not X that. Right. So when I had girlfriends, and now that I have a partner, my relationship with my partner is dramatically different, because it's so liberating, because I don't have to act. Not that I don't have to be a good person and mind my P's and Q's and build that relationship and foster those things. I'm not saying those things. I'm saying that facade, oftentimes when we're trying to go after something, can become a prison in many ways, right? And so how do we release ourselves out of that prison? We get to a place where we can tell the truth about our frailties, right? So I grew up in an environment where, as an 8-year-old boy, my uncles would ask me, how many girlfriends do I have, right? It wasn't my fault. It was the mindset of the folks that are around me. And so I have to tell the truth about that in a way that allows me to grow and become more effective. Go ahead, Doc.
One of the things also, Andre, that's amazing to me is how people can have this implied thought of who you are and what you do. And when you correct them and say, oh, no, that's not me. I do this exercise called Inside Out. It's just a manila folder. Inside of it is on the outside of it, is how you believe other people see you. On the inside of it is who you really are. And when you start looking at those two perspectives and points of views, a lot of times when you expose people to the fact that, no, that's how you see me, that's not who I am. It's just, that's how you see me. A lot of times people are taken back when you are honest, especially when you do the work that we do and you are authentically yourself and you say, no, I get angry, I get mad, and I may cuss sometimes because I am a clergy. And they says, well, but this is what God says in his word. I said, he says, be angry, but sin not. So you try your best not to sin, but that's why he reminds us that his mercies are new every morning, because just like they need it, I need it too. And there are some days I might need it more. I mean, not lately, I'm just saying in general, but just like you were saying about the girlfriend, so someone could hear it. And if they only get that piece of it, they say, oh, he has a wife and a girlfriend. But sometimes I tell my significant other, I said, I'm her, I'm she, I'm the girlfriend, I'm the dude, I'm your best broham, whatever it is. and I know we can't be everything to everybody, but what people expect is that in the body that we live in the professional environment, that we are perfect. But I want to let you know that I'm not. I do have flaws, and anyone that tells you that they don't, they are a liar.
Yep. Yep. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so, you know, when we think about the, you know, Johari's window, and, you know, so first, if I want to get rid of this kind of blind area in quadrant 2, I have to ask for feedback, right? If I want to operate in this quadrant 3, I have to tell the truth about my frailties to my friends, to my, well, I'm jumping ahead. But I have to be honest about my own stories and how I came to be, right? And so the next part I think is also important, which is when I add those two things together, my ability to tell, I have that self-disclosure. I don't know if you can see that in the box. It's this long box here. It says self-disclosure. And so that becomes the tool that I can use to be honest with myself, right? I remember in 5th grade, I had to memorize a poem, and I can recite most of it from 5th grade. It's amazing, by Edgar A. Guest, called Myself, right? And the didn't understand in 5th grade why my teacher wanted me to do that. But what that poem talks about is, I want to be a person who lives an authentic life, right? Mm-hmm. Not so that I can be better than or be less than, but if I'm spending my time being inauthentic, then I'm wasting my time that I could be using being authentic, right? So those are important things. So disclosure, and the other in quadrant 2 here is this kind of self-discovery piece. So when I get feedback, I get to discover things about myself. And so when I clicked too fast. So when I get to this 4th quadrant, there's some interesting things that start to happen. Is that I can get some self-discovery from telling people about my struggles, about where I came from, the truth about my inadequacies, so to speak. I also get others' impressions that kind of help reduce this blind spot. But here is the I don't want to say magic, but here's like the secret formula to this whole thing. Who is best to actually listen to your stories and tell you about yourself? Who's best geared to do that for you? To listen to your stories and tell you about yourself. I know that the tell you about yourself thing is kind of a silly thing, but I know some folks who say, you can always find someone to agree with your foolishness. You can always find somebody, right? So those aren't the people I'm talking about, but it is your friends, right? So in self-discovery, your friends will listen to you, and they will also be able to tell you about yourself. And so if I'm in a space where I'm trying to become more effective in what I do, it becomes important that I build mentorship, that I build relationships, that I build important, significant partnerships with people who can listen to my story and still tell me about myself. And I have to be humble enough in that friendship to actually listen and do what they have to say. I remember just real quick, and then I'll open up for conversation. Just being a middle school teacher, my students would say, "Andre, your breath stinks." And at first I would get upset, and it'd be, my breath doesn't stink, and all this kind of stuff. And we end up talking about my breath stinking, and then they wouldn't get any work done. right? So we fighting about my breath stinking, but we can't get any work done until I became more seasoned and I recognized what they were doing. They were trying to get me off topic because I was distractible like that, right? And so as I became more seasoned, they would say, Mr. Koen, your breath stinks. And I say, that may in fact be true, but you still need to get this work done, right? And so I did that, but then I would go behind my desk, check my breath, and be like, oh yeah, it does stink. So then I put some mint in, right? So I started taking that feedback, checking it, and then doing something with that information, right? And so oftentimes but I can only I feel more comfortable doing that in a relationship. Now, if one of the teachers came up to me and we worked together and we're colleagues, and they said, Andre, you might want to, check your breath, without question, I'm going to get a piece of gum. I'm gonna go brush my teeth real quick between classes. I'm gonna get some mouthwash, right? So recognize that relationships matter, particularly if we want to be more effective. Go ahead.
This pastor told me one time that if somebody offers you a mint, take it.
Because it might not be for you, but it's something you could give to somebody else, right? Some things are for you.
That's a nice way of doing it without offending you.
Right. So some things are for you and other things are to you. It's something like that. I don't know. But at any rate, I just want to open up the floor and think about key takeaways. Are there things that we talked about as a part of this Johari's window that you'll be able to take away and make actionable in your own life or in your own work? What are some key takeaways? You can type those in the chat room. You can.
One of them would be a willingness to listen to others and receive their information for your own growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Receive other people's information for your own growth, right? And just like we were joking, some things are for you and other things are just kind of come to you, right? So you have to take that and think about that and meditate on that. Yeah. Other key takeaways.
For me, it would be evaluate each quadrant and figure out where your growth areas are, where you could grow. Also, look at your weaknesses and find people who have those that are strong in those areas, and be willing to ask if they can assist you or mentor you in some way so you can grow, so that you can have balance. And I think sometimes what happens is when we find out something that we're not doing well, we have a tendency, one, to beat ourselves up. Two, is it may cause shame. But the other part of it is be willing to just admit it's there and find people that have those strengths and be willing to say, can you assist me? Or do you have anyone that can help me? And sometimes it may mean just doing some more research so that you can get better at those areas, because in every quadrant, I believe all of us have a weakness, and then we have our areas where we're strong. And if we're strong, we don't have to boast and brag about it, but help someone else who may be struggling in that area, instead of saying, well, you don't do this like I do it. None of us do. So we just have to find those areas. And in order for us to be good leaders and be valuable to our community, just be willing to admit that, not that you're flawed, but you're imperfect, but it doesn't mean that you don't have anything that you can impart to someone else.
Yeah, and I would sum that all up in the word humility, right? Everything that you just described are attributes of what it means to be humble, to recognize that you don't know, but that you can know, right? So it's different than just beating yourself up. It is saying that I don't know, but I can know. I don't have that skill, but I can get that skill, right? So, so I think that that's important. And too often, and I don't know why I'm hung up on this humility thing lately, but like I think people have the wrong idea about what that is. But that's a whole nother conversation. Again, I want to go back to just paying some bills real quick and help us remember that this is a part of our membership drive. And the more folks you invite to these conversations, the more they can hear about the great work that this organization is doing. Again, membership has its privileges, discounts on trainings and conferences and live webinars and networking and mentoring and coaching. And it's not all about the money, right? So we raise those funds so that we can continue to offer great programs. And so, call a buddy, bring a friend. We'll try to see you next Friday, same bat time, same bat channel. We look forward to engaging in some really incredible dialogue, and maybe we'll start talking about, how do you do a personal SWOT analysis? Maybe we'll talk about that next week. And so if we overlay that window of a SWOT analysis over our Johari's window, I think we get right to the point that was made earlier about how to be effective in looking at our weaknesses and our strengths and opportunities and challenges, right? So, I'm excited for our conversation next week. I look forward to seeing who you all become as we continue this conversation. And that about wraps up our time for today. If you have other questions, comments, or observations, feel free to reach out to us at Conflict Resolution Minnesota. We are delighted to engage folks in this Mediator Cafe. And until next week, I'll see you later. Peace.
Thank you, Andre.
You're so very welcome.